Hi, can everyone hear me? Okay,
Loud and clear. Yep. Thanks, Dunstan.
perfect. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dunstan Wilson, and I work as an R&D manager, research and development manager for King's College Hospital, and I am also a community advocate. I guess Tracy's touched on all the different things that Give Blood, Spread Love do in terms of encouraging people to donate. And I guess for me, it kind of aligned with what I was already doing in terms of I want to encourage the Black community to donate blood and get involved with knowing more about sickle cell. And I guess I'll start by how my journey started. As someone with sickle cell, I always forget to mention that I have sickle cell, SS, and as someone who has sickle cell, I had been going through life oblivious as to why doctors always asked me if I'd had a blood transfusion before. I'd never put two and two together that blood transfusion is a way of treating people with sickle cell. I just said no, and I moved on with my life, which is why when people say, oh, I never knew there was a need for blood, I completely get it because I was in that same boat. I didn't even know much about blood transfusions. But then as I journeyed through life, I met people such as Bola who made me realize that there's such a great need for more blood donors. And it's crazy to think that Bola, for example, relies on the goodwill of strangers to be able to be with her family and just simply exist. And I find that really heartbreaking, I guess, because one, I understand the pain that you go through when you have sickle cell, because it is really debilitating and, you know, you feel isolated already. But then I then began to think about having that pain and then going to hospital and being told, oh, we don't have the right blood for you to have a blood transfusion for you to feel better. And that kind of really hit home for me when doing this and volunteering as part of the Give Blood, Spread Love project. So Tracy's already highlighted some of the facts, but like with only 1% of the Black community donating, I just felt like that's just so tiny. That's so small for such a condition that affects so many. I mean, I think it's 15,000 people in the UK, and it's crazy to think if only 1% was donating. I'm not a mathematician, but that just sounds tiny. And so I really just took it on myself and along with the team just to reach out to the community and do our best to encourage people. And since then, I've spoken at events like this, on BBC radio stations, podcasts, etc., just to get the message across. And personally, like, I'm so passionate about it that even during my master's, I did a small project on why people don't donate in terms of my age group between like 18 to 25. And I guess, like Tracy mentioned, the main things are around education, awareness, and how convenient is it. And I guess thinking about it in terms of like what needs to shift. So like I started encouraging my friends and family first because that was my local pool. And I had many no's, I had many yeses, I had many let's go and see what it's like, and then rejections because, you know, they had low iron or whatever was the reason they weren't able to donate that day. So I've had my ups and downs, and I kind of feel like at first I felt very uncomfortable asking people because it felt as if I was forcing them to do something that was unnatural. But I think that's one of the changes that needs to happen within the community. Like giving blood is, in other communities, it's just a standard thing. Like I go to the blood donation center and I just see, I don't want to sound weird, but I just see loads of white people in the blood donor centers, and I rarely see any Black people in there when I'm there. But I feel like now, since for example, last year when we had like the massive Black Lives Matter movement, I have seen more people shift towards encouraging other people to get involved and get active. And, you know, it isn't just about donating money to a charity. I mean, I think everyone sometimes thinks that when you want to help someone, you have to give them money. I think sometimes now you have to think about what else can I do? What more can I do? And I think giving blood is probably one of the greatest miracles that you can do, because it's like, you know, for a small percentage of your blood that you're going to get back, and doesn't cost you anything, just your time. I just feel like people should now start to think about ways in which they can support one another. And I feel like blood donation is just something that I'm really passionate about because I'm so close to it. But I feel like it's something that we can all be passionate about because it is just helping someone. You don't know who it goes to, but at the same time, you know it's going to someone and they'll need it. It could be someone that's had a gunshot wound, it could be someone that has sickle cell, it could be anyone. But just doing it is just the greatest act of charity. And I just feel like we all have a responsibility to support one another in the community. And yeah, I guess also speaking about sickle cell, I never used to do it before because I kind of felt ashamed or like because no one really speaks about it or no one talks about it. And I guess like even for my family, for example, like when I began speaking about it more, my mom was kind of like, "Oh, are you sure you want to do that? You sure you want people to know that you have sickle cell?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think so." And it's kind of like it's one of those things where it's like now she kind of advocates for it as well and shares information about blood donation and sickle cell and all of that stuff because she's seen how passionate I am and how other people have like not looked at me any different, for example. And I think that was her main concern. She was worried that, oh, people are going to treat you differently. And that was always my concern as well, because there's a lot of stigma as well with having sickle cell that you can't do anything, etc. But yeah, my journey's been all about changing that narrative and encouraging more people and just speaking up because you know, when you have a crisis, for example, when I'm in a crisis, I never speak, I'm just in pain. That's how I deal with it. But when I'm well, like today, I'm here speaking about it and encouraging everyone to support people like me and support others within the community. So that's why I do what I do in a short summary. But yeah, if you're encouraged to sign up and donate blood, please do. I think Tracy's got the link somewhere. But yeah, that's me.
That's brilliant. Thank you for sharing, Dunstan. And I think one of the things that you said during your peace fair was about 1% of the population. Is that literally 1% of the population or 1% of the Black population? And I know Colin's here as well from the blood. You have to correct me if I say your title wrong, Colin. But you're from the blood donation service. I've said that completely wrong. But yeah, you'll probably be able to help Dunstan answer that question about the percentages.
Hi, evening, everyone. Thanks for that.
Correct my terrible description of your job title. So yeah.
Okay, so I'm community engagement lead, specifically for recruiting Black donors for the NHS Blood and Transplant Service.
There we go.
So yeah, my focus is working with organizations, charities, ambassadors, champions, churches, everyone who wants to be involved. We want to, because it's really interesting what you said there, Dunstan, when you went into places, donation places, centers, etc., you didn't see Black people. And that goes for the donation side as well. That goes for recruiting Black people. The organization, NHS is an institution. So blood and transplant is an institution. So as an institution, it can't reach the places that we who are in it can reach. And so over the last couple of years, working with organizations such as Sickle Cell Society, with Tracy and John James, etc., yourselves, we're able to get deeper from the perspective of encouraging more Black people to become blood donors, but also from the perspective of employing more people from our communities, because that is key. You know, people need to see when they go in, when they need help, when they want to give, they need to see more people that look like them. Mm-hmm. And that is key. That is key. So as an organization, we are doing more. The organization is doing more, and we're putting pressure on to do more. So in terms of the question of what are you saying is 1.5?
I think it's Dunstan said 1% of the population or 1% of the Black community. So I wasn't sure which.
Our blood donors.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. So our donor base, we have less than 2% of our whole donor base as blood donors on our donor base. who are registered blood donors and who give, and what we call a regular blood donor is somebody who has donated within the last year. Now, you can donate as men every 12 weeks or women every 16 weeks. So if you've given within the last year, we call you a regular donor. But yes, you're quite right. When we have 1.5%, certainly less than 2%, of the Black population as Black donors, as blood donors, it is very low. It is very low compared with the wider society, when that is as high as 7, 8, 9, 10% in certain places. Yeah. I wouldn't quite go to double figures, but we are the representation of blood donors is not where it should be, quite frankly.
Yeah. And so I think that's shocked me as well, that 12 weeks as a turnaround. That I think I've recently tried to donate blood and failed miserably, as Dunstan said. I got there and was rejected because I didn't have a strong breakfast that morning. But there was no information in the literature that came out that said this is what you should do. And my slice of toast wasn't cutting it, apparently. So I don't know if this is a question for let's see, from Winston as well. So the effects of the COVID-19 and sickle cell. Do you think the vaccines something that sickle cell sufferers should be at the front of the queue for as well? Hi, Winston.
Sorry, hi. Hello, everyone. Yeah, well, what I've discovered through doing these things is that actually sickle cell sufferers have been some of the most informed in terms of wanting to get the vaccine, just knowing what's going on. And that apparently is a side, because you have to get so engaged with your condition. Sickle cell sufferers are quite happy to take the vaccines, and that's what I've been told anyway from a doctor, a consultant that I was speaking to, who knows the area quite well.
Your opportunity to give us your experience and job title, so
that's all right, but
it's relevant.
Yeah. Okay. So, I could do that now. So, I'm Dr. Winston Morgan. So, I'm a research scientist in toxicology and clinical biochemistry. So, sort of quite a broad area. And I suppose I'm here to talk about sort of like helping people sort of demystify some of the myths people have heard about the COVID vaccine. But interestingly, as I listen to colleagues talking about sickle cell, there are some interesting overlaps. Some of them trivial, some of them not so trivial. And the trivial one is Dunstan says he's at King's College Hospital. Now, one of my first research jobs was at King's College Hospital in the thrombosis research unit. And ironically, almost every day, one of the things we'd have to do to do our experiments, we'd have to wander around the hospital chasing medical students to get them to volunteer to give us blood. Not that, sort of about 50 mils of blood, and then we'd take it back to the lab. We're interested in platelets and things like that because we're interested in thrombosis, but just collecting blood and sort of and doing research on it. So in that sense, I've sort of been involved in getting people to volunteer their blood. And I know it's a really hard thing to do. Even a small amount of blood, people just don't like just doing that kind of thing. The other relationship between sickle
cell. Your video's stopped there, Winston. So while Winston's reconnecting, I'll just
we've got a question in the chat from Yvonne Witter, and it says, are cases like Evan noted as negligence and the family compensated? So I don't know if you know any more about that, Tracy.
Thanks, Ina. In terms of cases like Evans, and my understanding is that a legal process will have to take place for that to be formally noted. As far as I know, that hasn't been started at the moment, but that's something that needs to kind of take its course. So the coroner gave his verdict in April of this year, so it's early stages. So yeah, a legal process would have to take place, is the answer to that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing was about that 12 to 16 week thing. So is the 12 to 16 weeks the absolute maximum and somebody's asked, sorry, minimum, if you know what I mean, you couldn't go in more often if you wanted to, and there was a question about age restrictions as well, whether there's a cap on the age or under the age, minors.
Sure, if I answer that, there is an age restriction. So basically 17 right through to 60 for a first-time donor. If you have been a regular donor, you can go way past 60. But as a first-time donor, it's 17 to 60. And then the first question was,
Yeah, so it was about that 12 to 16 weeks.
12 to 16 weeks.
Yeah, if you could do it more often, if you were brave enough or
well,
eager enough.
Interestingly, some people say, yeah, I've gone to give blood. I went to the hospital and give blood. Oh, yeah, I do it regularly. And actually, we use these terminologies and don't realize exactly what we mean. We're not talking about the same thing. When you give a specimen of blood for testing, that's not the same as donating blood, a unit of blood. And so lots of people really don't know that there is a difference. You can donate for testing, you can donate to be on the, for example, stem cell register or bone marrow register, but that's still not the same as giving blood as a donation, 450 milliliters of blood donation. And the important thing is, it's about, as a donor, your health. Your health is important. So we don't want to quite literally be draining you every few weeks. That wouldn't do much for you as a donor. So the blood can replenish itself sufficiently, and 12 weeks is, nearly three months is sufficient time. The blood can replenish within days, that amount of blood. So it's just about the health of the donor as well as the patient. So that's why, I mean, if you we have other forms of donation, for example, plasma or apheresis, and you can actually literally give every 2 weeks because they give you back your blood cells and just take your plasma. But it depends on what you're given. But in terms of red blood cells, it's 12 weeks for men and 16 weeks for women for obvious reasons.
Brilliant. Thank you, Colin. I do have 2 questions for Tracy now. Sorry, Tracy. The way that you described the stem cell bone marrow transplant, you said there's not quite a lot of those that happen, but in the UK, what sort of numbers is fairly infrequent? Is it, what sort of numbers are we talking about?
Thanks, Mark. I do not know what the numbers are. Let me be honest about that one. I am aware that because of the criteria that people have to meet to qualify to have take part in this treatment, that it's offered to a very, very small amount of people. And also, as I mentioned before, it's really dangerous because part of the process is suppressing people's immune systems in order that the donated stem cells or bone marrow is not rejected by the body. But I do not know the numbers. I can definitely try and find out for you.
That's brilliant. Yeah, so I'm just wondering how we compare with other countries as well. It's not something I've heard of before. I know my sister talked about them finding cures and trials happening, but
I reckon stem cells going to be the future, don't they? Isn't that how it's progressing in time?
I think there are lots of sorry, Colin. There's lots of kind of research going into new treatments. I think we feel that treatments for sickle cell haven't progressed as quickly as we would have liked, and there hasn't been sufficient investment over recent years in terms of finding cures for sickle cell disorder. We know that it's possible. There's lots of new research out there. You're right, Una. And I think that we're supporting kind of further work and research into this. And I think stem cell donation, bone marrow donation kind of will be part of that.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm not sure who's going to answer this one, but there's a question from Shireen which asks, can you cover what the obvious reasons are why women can't give blood more than every 16 weeks?
I'll let Tracy answer that one.
So
okay, go ahead.
No, I'm going to let you answer.
No,
you
because
raised
I
it.
actually mentioned it, and that's fair enough. No, because of women's menstrual cycle, so that's why it's slightly longer than men. That's simply as that, nothing more.
Right. So what if they're no longer having a menstrual cycle, like, you know, in menopause? Can they give more often, the same as men then?
I think the answer to that is we would ask you to take medical advice. We would speak to our clinicians and see what is safe for you. Going through menopause itself can be challenging, okay, and you may be on different hormones, etc., and then coming out. So it's really down to your individual situation, and we do take clinical, whether from the nurse or doctors, who would suggest, you know, what may or may not be appropriate. But at this point, the general is for women 16
weeks.
Yeah.
No problem.
Brilliant. And before we bring Winston back in, glad to have you back again, Winston. There was a point you made about prescriptions. That's okay, it happens. About prescriptions, Tracy. Is there anything that we can do? Is there a petition or anything that we can sign?
Well, Mark, there is a petition that you can sign.
Okay.
So there absolutely is a petition. So I will put the link. I've been putting some links in the chat box, so I will do that now. So the list of conditions on the exemption list has not been reviewed for 40 years, and we're aware that people, as I said, people often have to take regular ongoing medication, and for some people in the sickle cell community it's an extra expense that is kind of impacting on lots of other difficulties that people with long-term health conditions are facing. So that's not true for the whole of the community, but you know, it can have a significant economic impact, and we believe that it should be on the exemption list. And there are petitions that come and go. There's a current one. Please sign it. I'm going to put the link in.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you.
And connected to what you were starting off with, Winston, about that that connection between the COVID-19 situation and vaccines and sickle cell. Are people in the sickle cell category more at risk?
I mean, they are more at risk, but generally, as I said, they've been more willing, for example, to engage with their doctors and their health professionals, and that sort of like, whereas other members of the community who generally haven't engaged with, because if you have sickle cells, as I was saying, you tend to have to engage with your medical professionals, so you tend to have a trusting relationship, whereas people who don't have that condition tend not to be as engaged with their medical professionals, and so are less trusting, and so are less likely to take the vaccine. But the point I was making generally about COVID and sickle cell is the fact that COVID has sort of highlighted the lack of involvement of Black people in the medical profession generally, especially at the higher levels, and also in the research. And so that if you like, we see this, at least I do see this as an opportunity for things to change, where more people get involved, they do more research. And in addition, not just research in COVID, but in everything associated with our people from our background. So hopefully you'll see more people doing research, whether it's in diabetes, sickle cell, whatever it is, because hopefully the government will sort of encourage more people to move into medical professions and stay in it, whether it's in scientific research like what I'm doing, or general practice. So there's a benefit from the COVID that we hadn't really seen. We've just got to make sure that it delivers. I don't know if those of you who are on this call have read Professor Fenton's report after the first wave of COVID about Beyond the Data, where he made 7 recommendations. And in that, you know, he talks about the need to have more Black people involved, both in sort of like being medical researchers, doctors, but also in the management in hospitals and that kind of thing. All of those things will make a big difference, not just to COVID, but as I said, to things like sickle cell and diabetes and heart disease and kidney disease, all those conditions that impact on us and our community disproportionately.
Yeah. Okay, I can see the petitions in the chat box, and something you mentioned there Winston, sorry, was about the like the GPs. The people think that GPs have got good awareness of sickle cell, and the fact that my doctor's never suggested to me, have you considered donating blood? It's not something that they seem to prompt us to do if we're such low in the uptake. Might be one for Colin as well, because it's your department that's tasked with it. But the GPs play a key role in this.
So again, NHS is a big beast of an institution, and we are trying to get it higher up on the agenda of our GPs, because absolutely they, along with nurses, they are one of the most highly trusted people within the NHS. So trying to give them more information about the need for blood and the reasons why people require it, and how easy it is to give blood. And it really is easy to sign up to donate. And in this day and age, with you can just phone a number if you want, 0300 123 2323, or there's a Give Blood app, Give Blood NHS, an app. You go on there, you download it, and you can register and immediately start finding where you can give. So yeah, GPs are key, but you can imagine they have a big portfolio, and so getting them to be advocates on top of, as we say, their day job, it is a challenge. But we are pressing to have more awareness on that level. Yeah.
Well, my next comment's a bit tongue in cheek, Colin, because when I went to donate blood and for breakfast reasons I couldn't, they said you don't get a cup of tea and a biscuit on your first donation. Is that?
Well, first of all, shame on you, but shame on us. Shame on us for not eating breakfast. And, if I ask how many of us don't eat breakfast in the morning, it's kind of wrong. Lots of us don't do it, and we know it's the best meal. We should breakfast like a king. We should do it. So absolutely, to give blood, make sure you've had a meal, whether that's just breakfast and you've drunk something. Absolutely, that's a must. And then what was your tongue in cheek?
Biscuit and a cup of tea. You don't get one of those on your first donation. Well, we've a frequent flyer, apparently.
Yeah, well, we have done actually recently another deal with a biscuit manufacturer, which will come out shortly. We have loads of different biscuits, from Kit Kat to Club, digestives, bourbons, custard creams. We have them all. However, we don't do tea or coffee. We do lots of drink, water, juices, lemonade, orange and black currant. We do all of that. But we have found over the years, and you can understand, when we do tea, it can make people get hot again, and that can increase somebody's likeliness to just have a woozy, a bit of a faint. Okay, so we stay away from hot drinks, but it's important for us to help people rehydrate. So when you go in first, we encourage you to drink straight away, and then throughout the process. So hope all the biscuits are sugar-free. I'm afraid. Well, it's a fair cop. It's a fair cop, but we can't. If we do all that, then there will be so many people say, "Oh, well, I ain't going because I ain't." So hey, bring your own biscuits. I'm sure that will be allowed.
Bring your own flask of tea, but you shouldn't have it for, It's no biggie, is it really? Just have a glass of water or a juice. It's all good.
So is there any precautions, like you've said, after you've donated? Is there anything that you shouldn't do, or any precautions you should take afterwards?
So we say to our donors, once you've given, especially as a first-time donor, don't do anything strenuous. We get people who come in shorts and running gear, and they say, right, I'm going to go out for a run. So, whoa, slow down. That's a bit, because you don't know how your body may respond. Most people are fine. But you don't know what will happen. So don't do anything strenuous. You can go about your normal duties. And essentially, that's it. Here's a classic. You'd be surprised how many I was going to be ageist and young people I'm going to be who say, yeah, I'm going out tonight. I'm going out to the club. And whoa, if you, no. Maybe you come back. Maybe you come back and give when you're not going to be out raving and clubbing till clock of morning. Just for your health as a donor, just in case. There's nothing specifically that says it will have an adverse effect, but just in case, it's really important that the safety of the donor is as important as the safety of the patient. Of course, the patient is ill, so we really focus on that. But as a donor, your safety is important to us, and it could possibly have an effect a couple hours later. So don't, because, hey, back in the day when I was doing that kind of stuff, so you get dehydrated. You get dehydrated really easy because you're focusing on other things and drinks isn't on your mind. Well, it wasn't on my mind anyway. Etc. So no, it's looking after yourself just in case.
And I should have asked this question the other way around. Should you avoid alcohol the night before? Not that I get, paralytic or anything, but
alcohol.
I would avoid the whiskey, Mark. I would avoid the whiskey.
It's nice whiskey, I could admit. Yeah. Is there any restrictions on what you should do the night before donating or the day before?
Certainly. We expect people. I mean, if one thinks of themselves, they're given something therapeutic to help people who are not well. You're going to do your best to make sure what you're giving is as good as can be. So avoiding drinking, I mean, that is kind of a standard. You don't drink and take pills, so you wouldn't drink and give, and such like. It doesn't mean to say only teetotalers can give blood. That's absolutely not the case. But don't, have a swizz and then come in and give blood. What do they call it? For the courage, Dutch courage or something? No.
Fair play.
And it can actually stay in your system for a while, can't it? If you put 24 hours, I would say not touch alcohol for 48 hours prior.
You've ruined my private life there, but
it takes your kidneys 1 hour to process 1 unit of alcohol.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wowza.
So for every unit, it takes your kidneys an hour to process it. But remember that if you're taking medication, that has an effect on it because your kidneys can't do both at once. Things like that. And you've got to give yourself within the first hour, it's an hour, and then after the second hour, it then starts taking an hour for each unit of alcohol to be processed.
Well, I don't drink, so it doesn't bother me. I don't drink, so.
So generally, then, Mark, as long as you've not, drunk the day or the night before, you should be fine, generally speaking. But as I say, when you think of the donor, that helps you to have a different perspective of not the donor, sorry, the patient. It helps you have a different perspective to, well, I'm going to give blood tomorrow. So, let me go to sleep. Having 4 hours sleep, I wouldn't recommend that. Though we don't say to you, how many hours have you slept? But I can't keep, stating, focus on the patient and the health of the donor. That's really important.
Thanks, Colin. And I can see Winston. Yeah.
No, I just had a question again for Colin about, because again, people might be thinking about doing it. How is there the questionnaire that perhaps you mentioned it when I was off or something like that? But the questionnaire that you might have to fill in or answer. How personal, if you like, how invasive is it in terms of the things you have to reveal before you're allowed to give blood? Because that might put some people off. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it is It is a challenge. It is a challenge. We have a list of questions. It's a donor safety check, so that to check that you are safe, for your blood to be in the pool of blood to offer to ill people. So the questions that are asked generally of everybody. I say generally because it kind of flows. And there are areas that may turn out to be quite personal. So there are situations. The two areas, and we just say the two areas that are a challenge are our sexual health and our health around HIV. Those are the two areas, and that's associated, geographic and one sexual practice. But there, so for example, we say we've recently changed the approach to, because one of the things leveled at us is about discriminating against gay people. It's, well, actually, we ask the same question: as long as you've not had anal sex with somebody, you've only had anal sex with your partner and somebody and not anybody else, and your partner's not done it with anybody else for the last X amount of 3 months, and it's 3 months, okay, then you are safe to donate. If you can't answer that, then come back another time when it's safe, when you know the answer, etc. So those are kind of, yes, it is sensitive. It is sensitive, but we do follow that for everyone. And it does impact some people more than others, depending on geography, for example.
Yeah. And just probably following up on that then, so I don't remember being asked if I had sickle cell trait or any sickle cell conditions when I was trying to donate blood.
Right.
Does anything restrict Dunstan and people with the trait and the disease from donating?
Right. If I can say, I am being distracted. I think Carl is absolutely really great. He's got his physical hand up. So if you're not looking for the virtual hand up, you'll be missing him. He's had it up for 10 minutes. He's a good man.
Sorry,
so just
Carl.
making note.
Sorry, Carl. Go ahead.
Right. I have been listening to the conversation on sickle cell, and I've got a few questions. But one that I'm very interested in is that the fact is, most of this data on sickle cell is based on the American diaspora. What I'm concerned about is, since the Windrush intervention and the first, second, and third generation, which we now have from that influx of people, what is the statistics on our people from the Windrush generation, down that siblings in England, that actually we could base a percentage figure on? Because for me, being in the Caribbean and Trinidad, I know a few people who had sickle cells, and I give blood, quite a number of times, right? But in terms of following our trait from our Black diaspora, from the Windrush generation, what type of statistics do we have on that?
If I may refer you, actually, I think Tracy's stats that Tracy gave are actually UK, but yeah, as far as I can see. But go ahead, Tracy.
Okay, Tracy.
Yeah, hi, Carl. So the statistics around how many people have sickle cell in the UK, that's 50,000. That's UK statistics.
No, hold on. I'm focusing on the Windrush generation, right? When we come here in 48, and the generation, first and second generation and third generation, right? And looking at that type of statistics for we to collate, because we're looking at the Black people with sickle cell. We're looking at the American diaspora. We're looking at, from that cluster of people that came here, that is when we start taking data, right? Now, what type of, what is the cholesterol that we have there in terms of the Caribbean, diaspora from the Winrock generation?
Sorry, can I ask, Carl, are you saying how, as the number got bigger of people who were suffering from it? I'm just making sure.
We're not talking about American.
No, hold on.
Yeah.
Listen to me carefully. Most of sickle cell statistics is based on the African American data.
Oh no.
Right? Hold on, let me finish. Also.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is that we're collecting these, figures, but are we focusing on the influx of the Winrock generation from 48, right? And the siblings that we had, which has now grown up and had children and so forth, and we also have a dual heritage, interception. What are the sort of data that we have on children from that generation having sickle cell?
Yeah, I think this was something that John James covered in his presentation, because there's quite a number of white communities that have got sickle cell as well. But obviously I'll shut up, and if somebody knows the answer to that one. And I think...
Go ahead, Tracy.
So,
so Carl, tell me if this is on the right track of what you're asking. So my response to that is, I don't think we break down if we look at the amount of people in the UK that have sickle cell. If you're asking, is it broken down in terms of where people have migrated from? Is that correct? So do we have statistics to show the prevalence around certain groups that have migrated from certain areas from a certain period of time? Is that what you're asking, Carl?
No. What I'm saying, let me just break it down, right? When did we start collecting data on the Winrock generation, right, in terms of sickle cell? 48, 45, 60s, 70s? Just give me a date. What date did we start collecting that data?
Why do you need to know that information, Carl? I'm curious to know that.
Well, put it this way, I mean, it's not really, the information is very, very important in terms of how we are focusing on gathering that trend or that trait, right? Because we are now in an area of what we call dual heritage. A lot of interception, a lot of mixing and taking place, right? So we're going on a bigger scale as we move forward into 21st century.
That is why when Tracy was talking about her numbers, she said, if you're directly from West Africa, it's 1 in 4. And if you're from African Caribbean,
1 in 10.
It's 1 in 10. That kind of, those are the numbers. And I presume it would be the same thing in North America. Because remember, we all came from the same place, those who are African heritage. Whether we went to North America, from the same. I think the non-Tracy really, as you said, the mixing.
Yeah.
Is everyone else seeing the internet?
Yeah. If Winston, you could talk with your video off, we might hear you.
So the numbers would.
We lost you there, Winston. We don't know whether, if you want to turn your video off, it might be better, but we lost you.
But, okay.
Could I go on?
I've just done that.
Oh, that's better.
All right,
we can hear you.
Sorry, Winston and then Carl.
Yeah.
Oh, no, we're back to square one.
Back to square one?
You want me back?
No. If you want to try signing out and back in again, Winston, I know that worked quite well last time around. And then Carl, if you want to ask your question, if Tracy and Colin can answer it, that'd be superb.
Okay. You want me to carry on?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So that is something to actually focus on. Also, in terms of I would say primary intervention in terms of sickle cell and our care. What part of that type of diagnostic should we focus on or hospital primary care should focus on in terms of making sure that the fact is we are tested for that sickle cell intervention?
Can't hear you, Winston.
Right, it's trying to come back in as well. So legacy noise. Yeah. Sorry. All right. So just so I've got it clear, Cal, because I think Tracy will probably remind me of this. John James said that there's no routine testing of people. So no matter what background you came from, they didn't routinely test to see if you had sickle cell trait or not. So there's no way of gathering those numbers. But Tracy's got a hand up, and then Portia.
Okay, thank you. So just on the trait question, I noticed there's a question about trait in the box as well. So all children are now routinely tested for trait at birth. So that has been in place, I think, for a couple of decades. So the people like me who, we're not tested at birth. Our recommendation is if you have any suspicion that you might have sickle cell trait and you weren't tested when you were born, then it's a reasonable thing to check that out. But all newborn babies, regardless of their heritage, so regardless of what they look like, what color their skin is, where their parents come from, everyone is tested.
Yeah.
And part of our work at the Sickle Cell Society, I mentioned screening at the beginning, because obviously we have people who live in this country who have come from countries where there isn't a screening program in place, or they may have had symptoms that were missed. So our screening program is about supporting people to get tested, and involved in that is supporting people who might want to have a child with someone that has sickle cell trait, because I don't think it's in this presentation, but there's a 1 in 4 probability of someone having a child with sickle cell if both of the parents are sickle cell trait carriers. So that's a really important thing in terms of awareness in the work that we do. And also, I think, Mark, you mentioned that we're seeing slowly, white appearing people, children, have sickle cell because of the mixing that Carl alluded to, because we all live amongst each other, and that's very much part of our lives. So that is how sickle cell trait is increasing. It is increasing, and it isn't just Black people that get sickle cell trait. There are people from the Mediterranean, Asian parts of Asia where it is prevalent, but anyone can have sickle cell.
The next question to you again, which is important, in terms of what type of blood group are you looking for? Because we have different blood groups. We have O, which is normal. What are the sort of blood group that we're looking for when people are going to give blood for the sickle cell bank?
Well, there isn't a sickle cell bank, but I'm going to hand over to Colin to answer that, if that's all right.
Sure, no problem. And so there are the major blood groups A, B, O, and AB, and that spreads across everybody, our whole society. So as African Caribbean, we have various, there are more, for example, people with group B, something like 9%, over 9% actually, in fact, I think it's 15% within the African Caribbean, whereas in the white population, that's a lot lower. However, so whether you're ABO or AB, okay, the real kicker is a subgroup, the RH. So we talk about O-pos and A positive and O negative. It's that negative, we call that the RH, or some people say the rhesus system. That subgroup is key to helping people. If we get that right, if we get that subgroup right, and Tracy said RO is what we are looking for, people who are transfused multiply, they get lots of transfusion over time, they're less likely to produce antibodies to other blood groups. Now, I used to do blood groups for 25 years, but there are over 200 250 blood group systems. So quite a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's for NHS Blood and Transplant to provide good and matched blood. They will always provide matched blood. But as I say, you don't produce antibodies until after you've received something that the body says, oh, this is foreign. Okay. It may or may not produce an antibody, but it can. The more you give it, the more likely it is to produce an antibody. So as long as we keep it as well matched as possible, there it's less likely to happen. So this RO blood, of which, as Tracy says, in Caribbean it's up to 40%. In African it's up to 50% of us have that RO blood subtype, whereas in the European population it's less than 2%. You know, so more of us have it, and more of that, and so that ethnically matched blood is a lot safer and better matched blood to give. So I hope that helps in terms of blood groups, Carl.
Yeah, definitely. I just was trying to follow up certain things. Now, in terms of the length of time.
Sorry. Can I just answer this? Forgive me. We did talk about sickle cell trait in terms of passing it on. In terms of donation, you did ask, Mark. You can give blood if you are sickle cell trait. Now that was something in the past that they said no, you couldn't. Then when we've said it for 20 years, but most people still think you can't give blood if you're sickle cell trait. But you can. What we do ask is, if you know you're sickle cell trait, please let the nurse know that you are. You can still give blood, but let them know. And it's just all about the process, what happens to blood afterwards, how we process red blood cells and white blood cells, etc. But you can give blood even when you are sickle cell trait. Obviously, if you have SS, you have the full-blown disorder, you need blood, you don't give blood.
Yeah. Thank you.
So the arrow that is specific for the sickle cell patient, right? How long do we keep that in storage? And is it specific for the sickle cell patient?
There are two answers to that. One is, as in with all blood, blood has a finite shelf life. And so blood shelf life is 35 days, up to 35 days. Okay, that's all blood. After that, you know, but NHS Blood and Transplant, we try to make sure blood doesn't hang around for more than 2 weeks. The fresher it is, the more viable it is. But sometimes when we find people who have rare blood groups that are very helpful for helping people with antibodies, and we get lots of antibodies from people with sickle cell, sometimes those rare blood groups, we actually freeze them down. We send them to Liverpool and they're frozen down and put in a frozen blood bank, quite literally, and recovered periodically when we have somebody who has many antibodies and we can't find it in the normal hospital or NHS Blood and Transplant blood bank. We can't find it. We send, these blood groups, it matches, please can you unfreeze it and send it down? So in terms of that, but blood goes to people who need it.
Right,
We don't keep blood from people who need it and say, well, just in case somebody with sickle cell turns up and will want it. No. We are to provide blood for anybody who need it at the point of need, at the time of need. Whoever that is, road traffic accident, childbirth, surgery, cancer, you give blood and it goes to people who need it. The more of us who give, and we have these different blood groups, it gives the blood transfusion service and the hospital blood banks it makes their job a lot easier and actually cuts down the amount, the length of time that a sickle cell patient has to wait in order to get compatible blood.
So, Colin, just last question. Now, we got a population that are actually giving blood, right? And if we sort of oversubscribe, then the fact is we have a lot of blood which might be wasted, right? Now, is that a possibility? Because people want to be going and giving the last pint, right? And then they know, well, in 25 days, it's gone down the drain, right? Now, how do we protect that?
Okay, that's a really interesting point. My initial response was, we're never going to have too much. But you're right. What if let's do an extreme? What if all Black people that want to give blood, that are eligible, all turn up over one weekend and give blood, or 1 week? Then they can't give for the next 12 to 16 weeks. So what's going to happen now? Because it's going to run out over 30 days. So what's going to happen? No, which is really why one of the reasons that NHS Blood and Transplant, we give people appointments. You get an appointment slot to donate blood. You want to give, when do you want to give it, etc. And we'll give you an appointment, a time to come in and you give blood. And we use that information to help us spread people out over weeks and over the months. So we don't have a rush that we can't handle. But I will say, Carl, we'd love to have the situation where we're saying, oh, slow down, people, slow down. We're nowhere near that in any way, shape or form. We want you to come. So back over the 19th and 20th of June, we had a weekend where we focused on, Black people giving blood. So we had 3 sessions in London on the Saturday, 1 in Birmingham, 1 in Manchester, 1 in Bristol, where we said, Black people, come. These sessions that are set up in Stratford, set up in Westfields, in Shepherd's Bush and the Western Donor Centre, these are specifically for you. Come and give blood. And then the following day, had a really big one in Tottenham and one in Brixton Town Hall. Okay, they call it Lambeth Town Hall. I call it Brixton Town Hall. And there was 4 Black people, and we will have that. We will have that because we need to keep encouraging us to give blood. Right now, there's less than 13,000 Black donors. We need to get that up, and Tracy did give us the figure. We need to get that up at 40,000. Now, that was at the beginning of the year. We're actually pushing that harder now. So we're nowhere near, being superheroes, and enough of us are giving blood. We're not there at all.
My final question is, we are now nearly 2 years into the pandemic, right? Would you say that the fact is due to the pandemic that we are now struggling for donors because nobody could actually move anywhere, right? So would you say that the pandemic have had a type of repercussion on donors coming forward?
Interesting question that is. So firstly, our procedures for donation sessions, people giving blood, have been fully compliant with COVID. We have social distancing, we have your temperature checked, you're triaged, you're asked all the questions, you have to sanitize your hands. All the folks up until the 19th of July, everybody had to wear a mask. But even now going forward, we encourage donors to give masks, but people on the system, the employees, the staff, etc., the colleagues, they will all wear masks. Everything is wiped down. If you sit on it, when you get up, we wipe it down if anybody else is going to sit on it. So we have stringent procedures in place to mitigate against the spread of COVID. So we have COVID secure places to give blood because it doesn't stop. The requirement for blood did not stop over the pandemic. But absolutely. So in the year 2020, okay, basically the first year of COVID, of the pandemic, of regular Black donors, it fell to 73%. It fell to 73%. Where we really were impacted harder is of new, because we need new Black donors. I've just been saying, we need new. So that fell to 11% of regular new donors coming in. So it really did impact. What I can say, Carl, is that and I'm pleased to say this, and it's not just talking numbers. It's actually saying, Black people are responding. Now, in the last 3-4 months, we are responding, and the numbers of people coming and giving blood is increasing rapidly. And that's a good sign. I think that's a really good sign. And I encourage us all, if we can't give blood, find somebody who can, because we do need more and more of us to become blood donors.
Great.
Yeah, I think that's
thank you,
Colin. And that's the whole reason why, we had John James come and talk about sickle cell a few months ago, and then we've had Tracy and yourselves come this evening, because we know how important it is for our community to get our blood. And I know that you said earlier about you did a big push for it in London and in Manchester and in Birmingham. Is there any way that you can do sort of big pushes and stuff like up here in West Yorkshire? Because we always, West Yorkshire's got quite a lot of Black African Caribbeans, and in terms of obviously the cities and what have you, we do seem to get forgotten about here. We've got Leeds, we've got Bradford, we've got Huddersfield, we've got Sheffield, and there's massive populations of Black people in all them towns and cities. So is there anything that can be done like for here in our communities to try and give that big push and get us out there basically, and not forgotten?
So one of the things is that I'm really pleased and thankful to you organizations such as yourself, and Mark, Pursuit of Happiness. It's really important. You're working with Tracy Williams and your Sickle Cell Society, your local Sickle Cell Society. It's engaging in that way, and us being made aware, where we can say, we can empower, we can help you, we can give you information, we can give you tools, we can send you to our website and say, download all these things. If you want more, we can provide more. We can come and help and deliver, not just online. We can organize people in persons. To be fair, it's not as easy as it is in London. I'm a South Londoner, forgive me for that.
All right, you mentioned Liverpool earlier. I smiled as broadly as I could when you said it. As an Arsenal fan, I know that was difficult for you.
No, Liverpool's not difficult.
It's already said Liverpool is the team outside of his own, so don't go there, Mark. He's already said that. He's bigging us up.
Yeah,
we've got to enjoy that.
But you're right. It's the same obstacles as the vaccine. There's plenty of mobile blood donation buses that come around, but they don't come to our area. So you're making a suggestion that we should be contacting and trying to encourage that to happen.
So it's a challenge. We do encourage people to, as I say, if you download the app, okay, it will tell you where the sessions are closest to you. Okay, that's our first go-to. We do encourage, like I mentioned before, if there are particular places that we can guarantee very high numbers of Black people enrolling and coming in to give blood, we will then do things to help focus our efforts in those areas, work with the organizations, work with the champions, work with the ambassadors in order to deliver that, to even to the extent where we will try, Tracy, you're stealing the limelight with the cat now. No, but
yeah.
but even to the extent where if we have a special bespoke donation session, that's rare, but we do that, and of course we have to widen our net. So as you're saying, there are bigger populations that we can focus on. We will work with you to try and deliver and engage more in that. Absolutely.
That's great. That's honestly, that's really good to hear, Colin, because we need to do this. For anything to change, we have to do things. We have to do something different. We have to do what's not being done. Because if you just stay at stalemate, then there's not going to be an increase. Nothing is going to change. We need to move forward, not stay at stalemate or go backwards.
Absolutely, we will try. I say we will try. I've said it twice already. I'll say it again. The blood transfusion service, the blood and transplant service is NHS. You don't get a bigger beast and system organization than that. It takes time to respond. Yeah. I'd love it to respond in a matter of weeks, and Tracy will tell you how challenging it can be to work with us. But the important thing is, like the Sickle Cell Society there, we keep working, we keep churning, and we keep moving on, and it gets better. It gets better, and we're listening. I say we are listening, because I am part of that, and the reason why I'm here is so that the organisation does listen to.
Brilliant. And I know you've all been speaking for nearly over an hour now. I can see Yvonne Lee's got her hand up, and then Tracy, if you want to follow up straight afterwards. Yvonne, if you want to unmute yourself.
I do have a few questions in the chat, so we will come to the chat if everybody's okay with that, meaning Tracy, Winston and Colin and Dunstan, if that's okay.
Yeah, I want to ask a very uncomfortable question. And with the sickle cell trait, for persons who have the sickle cell trait, we know that it takes two persons with SS to produce a sickle cell child. So I'm wondering, is there any form of education among the sickle cell population to sort of, make them aware of the risks that they run if an AS person would marry another AS person? That's why I say it's a very tricky question. I mean, how are we as a people handling that?
Hi, Yvonne. I'm going to see if Dunstan would like to speak to that, if you're comfortable doing so, Dunstan.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things to note is that there is more resources out there. Obviously, I'm a product of, but both my parents had sickle cell trait, and both of them had no idea that they had the trait. And it was a shock to them that I had sickle cell when I was born, because they had come from Sierra Leone, so they come over to the UK. There was no education in Sierra Leone about sickle cell. So that's one thing. And I think now the standpoint is, especially with the Sickle Cell Society, it's about awareness and information and spreading that information. It is a tricky conversation, because I wouldn't say it's solely the responsibility of the sickle cell community, as you put it. I think it's the responsibility of everyone, so that everyone is aware. Because if, for example, you have never gone to your GP and asked, do I have sickle cell trait or anything like that, you wouldn't be aware. So I think there's that to point out as well, that isn't just, the onus just isn't on what you refer to as the sickle cell community, it's on everyone, just to make sure that you're aware of what your blood type is, and just make sure that everyone is conscious of that. Because I think there's an estimation, there is a assumption that if you don't go to the hospital, you're always well, there's nothing wrong with you. But that's not the case. You go to hospital sometimes and your GP says, oh, did you know you have this and this, because they've done a blood test. So I think being really informed about your own health helps to advise what next, especially when you're considering to have a family. And one of the things that I did the last 2 years ago was have sort of genetic counseling, just to, I knew the information, but sometimes when you are thinking about starting a family and things like that, you should speak to a genetic counselor, for example. That should be common practice, just to say, you know, and then they ask you questions about your family history. Is there any history of cancer, for example? Is there any history of sickle cell? Things like that, just to, should be common practice now. And I think as we move to an age where we are better informed and we are thinking about it more, I think over time it will get a lot better in terms of the numbers of sickle cell. But I think, yes, there is information out there. Sickle Cell Society does provide information. But I think it's just a good practice to have genetic counseling and to make sure that before you get into a relationship or you have a child, for example, that you're fully aware of what is in your DNA. But yeah, that's what I'm going to say.
Wow, could I add to that, please? Dunstan, that's amazing. What you've just said is amazing, because I know it's not easy. Just to point out, Yvonne Lee, that you don't have to be sickle cell SS. You don't have to have the full-blown disease to pass it on. You can show no symptoms and just carry the gene. And if two of you have no symptoms and are just traits, are carriers, you have 1 in 4 chance of having a sickle SS child. So, and that's one of the issues. Lots of people just didn't know because they were fine and they were healthy. So it's almost as if it skips generations and you don't realize that it's not skipping generations, it's just unseen. So, and then I run the choir Be Positive, and in chatting with a number of them, Be Positive is a choir that's been made up, that was constituted by the blood and transplant. It's full of people who have sickle cell. Their families are directly affected by it, and supporters. So that's what the choir is, and we get together and we take the message around the country and actually internationally. And I've had conversations with a number of them. And there's one young lady, we were on the train, and she said, Colin, I don't have a boyfriend. She's in her 30s now. She says, one of the very first conversations I have with any guy, she says, do you know your sickle cell status? Are you trait or carrier? Do you? She asks that straight away. And anybody, one who doesn't know, she says, go and get it. And if you don't, bye. It's as simple as that. And then she says, if they come back and say, yeah, well, I'm a sickle cell trait, she says, bye. And she has to make these hard decisions about your relationship. You're just a normal person. And you have to make these hard decisions. And you're right, genetic counseling, that's really important. But it's not easy emotionally. It's traumatic. It can be traumatic. You're making these life decisions. It's really difficult. So we mustn't blame. It must never be a blame culture in any way, shape, or form. 300 babies are born each year, and most of them are not born to people. Well, no, let me not say that. Okay, and they're not necessarily born to people who have the full-blown disease. In fact, the stats show that most are born to people who do not have the full-blown disease.
Yeah, that's why I had said it's a tricky question, because I know it's a deeply emotional question, because it's up, it involves your choice of partner and your life moving forward. And yet it is such a vital part, because like Dunstan had said, his parents didn't know, because an AS person wouldn't know that there's anything wrong with them, except maybe if they came to England, sometimes they do trip into a crisis, because it gets cold or something like that, a sickle cell crisis. But usually, like the AS person wouldn't know that they're AS. Then they meet another AS person, they don't know either. And then you end up with an SS baby, And so it can come as quite a shock. So that is why I had said, what are we as a people doing to educate our people regarding this situation, and how it can, this is a ridiculous thing to say, how it can best be avoided, because the only way to avoid it is that 2 AS people shouldn't marry, but how many of us are not AS? You know, so it reduces finding life partners. But as Dunstan said, it's, you know, genetic education and not being ashamed, because he had mentioned that his mom had said to him, are you going to go out there and let everybody know that you're sickle cell? You know, it's taking the stigma away from being a sickle cell trait or a sickle cell person. Take the stigma away and replace it with knowledge of what the sickle cell really is.
Brilliant. Thank you both. I'm going to launch a poll. If you can just go through it and answer as many questions as you can, that'd be brilliant. It does help us to get a steer on what we should do in future meetings. I'm going to mop up some of the chat questions as well, and just float one for Winston, because I'm dying to know how you got into the line of work that you're into, and just that sort of STEM career path, if there's something you can talk to us about after the questions I've read out. So one of the questions from Corinne was, what's the difference between sickle cell disease and, I always struggle with this, thalassemia? Close.
Thalassemia, I think
exactly what I said. Yeah, exactly that. Shireen says, from her experience, if the iron levels are low, it affects the ability to donate blood. Is it? And Corinne, sorry, do you want to answer those two first of all?
What was the first one, Mark?
Yep. So the first one was, what's the difference between sickle cell disease and, go on, Una.
Thalassemia.
Mm-hmm.
So I might not be the best person on the line to answer this. I mean, thalassemia is another inherited blood disorder. As far as I know, it manifests in a different way to sickle cell. I don't know if Winston or Colin can add some more information here about how thalassemia manifests.
So very similar. It's not so much in the sickling of the blood cells, but in the ability of the blood cells to carry oxygen still is limited. It's all part of what we call something called hemoglobinopathies. There are a number of different problems or genetic disorders, and thalassemias are some, sickle cell are others, and there are a number of different thalassemias, and they affect, you know, Mediterranean, Southeast Asian, etc., in different proportions, but they're all part of genetic disorders of the way the blood. I'll try not to use any technical terms, but the constitution of the ability for the red blood cells to carry hemoglobin, to carry oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. The only thing to add to that is, as you said, that you find these in different populations. So you can sort of, one population might be sort of more linked to thalassemia, others might be linked to sickle cell. But they're all I better not even try and say that now. I've got my tongue tied.
It's catchy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go on.
Sorry, Matt. Okay. So the next one, is it true that sickle cell disease is sickle cell disease, whatever the location?
So I think I wonder if this is alluding to things like different climates, etc. So I think I would answer that by one, pointing out that people that have sickle cell disorder are affected individually. So not everyone who has SS will have the same, will experience it in the same way. So it's very, Johnson's talked about not needing blood transfusions, generally being very well, thankfully. Someone else could be affected far more severely. So I would say, firstly, it's important to acknowledge that it's specific to the individual. I think there's some information around perhaps being in different climates. So being extremes of temperature can, for example, trigger a sickle cell crisis. So some research around if you live perhaps in a warmer place, that would mean that you have less crises. But it's not that black and white, I would say. I think it's very dependent on the individual and the environment. And the environment can include a host of other things, like where that person works, for example, and the amount of stress they're exposed to. So I hope that answers your question. So I would say that it is very much dependent on specific circumstances. Whoever put that question in, if they want to tell me whether that answers it, that would be great.
Yeah, Corinne.
Okay, so Tracy, I mean,
Yeah, Corinne.
Yeah, thanks for the detail, Colin, as well. I just meant that a diagnosis of sickle cell is you are going to have those disformed red blood cells, that however it manifests, whether you have it, to an nth degree or a Y degree, sickle cell condition is sickle cell condition, and it all deserves the same kind of, well, not treatment, but recognition. That's all I meant. Okay.
Oh, sorry, Corinne, I went off on a tangent there. There is, I think there's some complexity under this as well, because there are a range of sickle cell disorders, but sickle cell disorder describes the sickling of red blood cells, and that's the kind of the essence of the term.
If I could add to that, there may be subtext or may not be. One of the challenges that people with sickle cell have is that when they go into crisis and they present and they speak to clinicians, many clinicians say, it's not that bad. They don't listen. They haven't in the past listened to the patient, which is what happened in the case of Nathan Evan Smith. Okay, some clinicians don't listen. They think, no, I know sickle cell and I've got a patient who's got sickle cell and they very rarely come to see me, and all we need to do is give them, a little bit of a drug to treat their a bit of the pain, and they'll be fine. And they think that is okay. Now, it affects people, as Tracy says, differently. It can impact them, some very greatly, in all kinds of ways. Leg ulcers, they'll have, organ failures. The pain can be absolute. In the choir, there are a couple of them who walk around with medication. They have to actually have a license for the medication is that strong, etc. So it does impact people differently, but it is still sickle cell. And people need to be listened to and heard when they say, I have sickle cell and I'm experiencing this complication, this pain, this situation now. Please listen to me. Don't tell me what I should be feeling, what I should be doing, etc. And I think that's important to understand.
Brilliant. Thank you, Colin. And I'll just advise all of our guest speakers that we are legendary having long sessions. I don't want to keep you up too late, but I'll probably say in about 7 minutes. We continue once this is finished. We have an after-hours session which will talk about everything and anything that's happened over the past 7 days.
Is that when we do the drinking?
That's it, the after-hours session. Yeah. You've got it.
After hours.
Yeah. But there's a couple more questions. So I think Yvonne wanted to know, or stated that in the American system where she got married, people were tested for sickle cell as a precondition of marriage in New York City.
And that was in the 80s, yeah. Is it done in the UK?
No,
I don't think so.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
But understand
pregnancy,
in the
yes.
US,
Pregnancy,
it's in some.
yes.
Sorry. So go ahead. So I was just saying, in some states it is. It's not in all states. In many states it is the case. But here in the UK, it is not the case. It's not the case. And while we're under, I better be careful how I make political statements.
Nah, go for it.
But while we're under the libertarian nature of Boris Johnson, he's not likely to do that either.
No. Well, you know, oddly enough, in the 90s, when I went to see my doctor to ask what blood type I was, he wouldn't tell me. I'm thinking, what was it, a secret? And I don't know if that's. I had to get when I was in holiday in America. Actually, I got a blood test kit, just to find out what blood group I am. So B+, I could join the choir. Probably, probably not with my voice, but so Abdul's typed in that he's heard that doctors don't give priority for sickle cell as it doesn't affect the white community as predominantly as it does in the black community. So I don't know if that's something that needs to.
Well, the whole issue around medical. So again, going back to the COVID thing and medical racism and actually being listened to, that's one of the things that came out and why people weren't engaging with health services both here and in North America is because people started telling stories of when they engaged with medical professionals generally, they weren't listened to. And as Colin said, you know, you go in and you give them your symptoms, but they think they know better, that kind of thing. So there is a link. So it's not, that thing is not unique to COVID. It's unique to how, I feel like, the medical profession has historically treated Black people, not listening to them, not validating. And that's why it goes back to the thing about having more Black people involved in the profession, because once you have lots of Black people involved,
I'm hoping your internet connection is going to hold up.
Someone. So is it, every time I start talking, my internet goes off.
Turn your camera off. It might help. It might help.
Can you hear me now? Or
well, you still sound like you're underwater a bit, slowing down. You sound a bit drunk, actually, so you haven't had a few.
I am having trouble because I'm using one of these. Okay.
Yeah, Gremlin's in that line, right?
No, I'm using a mini hub because my normal hub isn't working.
Oh, you sound better now.
It's a 4G.
Oh.
Yeah, it's 4G as opposed to right. Yeah, so that's what's going.
Oh, it's a pity. I really did want to know how a 12-year-old Winston Morgan got into the profession that he's in, whether he walked around in a white coat in junior school, because it really is, like he's just said, the more Black people that are involved in that system, the more likely it is to improve. So we'll see if Winston can come back in soon, but the chief executive officer of our National Health Trust is from a Black background and he's moving on, unfortunately. And it's like, if having somebody at the top of the triangle doesn't, sorry, Winston, go ahead. I'll finish my little.
No, I'll switch back again because I said I'm using two routers or two hubs and I keep switching from one to the other when one goes off, I switch to the other back.
Yeah.